The text came in at 6 in the morning, while my suitcase was already by the door. "Dad, the plan has changed. You're not coming. My husband wants privacy with his own family." 12 words. And just like that, 40 years of building something with my own two hands got reduced to an inconvenience my daughter could delete with one thumb. I didn't cry. I didn't call her back screaming. What I did instead is the reason I'm telling you this story tonight. My name is Walter Hendricks. I'm 68 years old, and for 40 years I ran a construction outfit out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the kind of work that leaves your knuckles scarred and your back permanently bent a few degrees, in exchange for houses other people get to raise their families in. If you've ever built something with your hands, a business, a home, a family, and then watched someone you built it for treat it like it never cost you anything, you already know the specific ache I'm talking about. Stay with me, because what happened over the following 3 days is the part of this story that still surprises me, even now. That gray morning, the kitchen was silent in a way it hadn't been in years. My late wife Louise used to fill this room with noise, humming while she cooked, laughing at something on the radio. This trip, a cruise through the Norwegian fjords, wasn't a vacation to me. It was her last wish before she closed her eyes for good. She wanted her ashes scattered over the Sogne Fjord, somewhere she'd once told me felt like the edge of the world. She wanted me to finally rest. After 4 decades of pouring concrete and hauling steel, I'd promised her I'd make it happen. My daughter Nicole knew exactly how sacred that promise was to me. She chose to trample it anyway. I read her text again and again. Not one apology, not one real explanation. Just a command, delivered cold, from the only child I had left in this world. My chest tightened like something structural had given way inside it. This wasn't the ache of old age. This was the specific pain of a builder watching his own life's work crumble in real time. I want to be honest with you about what I expected of myself in that moment, because it surprised even me. I thought I'd fall apart. I didn't. Something in me went very still instead, the kind of stillness that comes right before you make a decision you can't take back. I stood up. I set the phone down on the counter, and the soft thud of it against granite felt louder than it should have. My hands thick, scarred across every knuckle from 40 years of brick and stone clenched without my permission. These were the hands that built the $2.5 million house my daughter now lived in. The hands that signed the check for her first luxury car. And in the eyes of Nicole and her husband Bradley Kessler, these hands had become something to apologize for. I remembered a dinner at that mansion the month before. Bradley had asked me, politely, almost gently, to wear gloves at the table. My scars, he said, might make the other guests uncomfortable. Nicole sat beside him and said nothing in my defense. She just smiled and nodded along. I understood now what that smile actually meant. To them, I was an old bricklayer whose usefulness had quietly expired. If you've ever sat at a table where the people who love you most decided, without saying it out loud, that you were an embarrassment to manage rather than a person to include, you already know that particular kind of loneliness doesn't announce itself. It just sits there, in your chest, long after the dinner's over. The pain in me had already started turning into something colder, something dense and unbreakable. I walked to the window and looked out at the yard, the wind moving hard through the branches, and my mind started working the way it used to on a job site, assessing damage, finding the load-bearing point, figuring out what could actually be salvaged, and what had to come down completely. Nicole and Bradley wanted a fight. What they were about to get was a demolition. I slipped my hand into my pocket and felt the edge of the boarding pass I'd already printed. Louise used to say the fjords were where a person's soul finally got quiet. The whole trip had cost $55,000, every cent of it mine, earned the hard way. I'd trusted Nicole with the booking, with my cards, with the whole arrangement. I believed she'd honor her mother's last wish. I'd trusted the wrong person. An email notification lit up the tablet on the table. A confirmation from the cruise line. Passenger information updated. My name, gone. In its place, 2 names I didn't expect: Gerald and Vivian Kessler, Bradley's parents. My daughter had used her late mother's dying wish to buy favor with her husband's family. She wanted to prove she belonged among people whose comfort had never cost them a single callus. I looked down at my own hands again. 40 years of scars. Hands that had worked until they bled so she could go to a good school. Hands that personally oversaw the construction of the house she now lived in. The house I'd signed over to her the day she married Bradley. That memory used to make me proud. That morning, it made me feel like a fool. I sat down at my computer and opened the management software from my old company, wanting to see exactly how far this had spread. What I found on the screen froze me completely. A transaction from Nicole's own account, executed just hours earlier. My name wasn't just removed from the trip, it had been surgically erased from the booking history. Like I'd never existed in that itinerary at all. She'd used the password I trusted her with to strip her own father of his rights. I dug further into our joint accounts and found something that made my stomach turn over completely. A pending filing. A temporary asset freeze, based on a claim that I was showing, quote, diminished legal capacity due to mental health concerns. My daughter wasn't just stealing a trip. She was trying to have me declared incompetent. The little girl who used to cry when I scraped a knuckle on a job site was now plotting to lock the rest of my life inside a legal cage. Honestly, if that were happening to someone I loved, I don't know if I could have stayed as calm as I did in that chair. But something in me had already decided that rage was the wrong tool for this particular job. A skilled demolition man doesn't swing a sledgehammer blindly. He finds the load-bearing point and places the charge with precision. And once you decide to bring a structure down, you'd better be ready for the dust that follows. My phone buzzed with a location alert. The family car, still on my maintenance plan, was parked outside a private clinic on the edge of the city. My instincts told me the trap being built for me was nearly finished. I grabbed my keys. I needed to see the blueprint of their plan with my own eyes. The drive out was quiet, fog thinning against the windshield. Nicole's car sat prominently in the clinic's lot. I pulled the hood of my jacket low and moved down the empty hallway of the VIP wing, soft laughter drifting from the last room, door slightly open. I pressed myself against the wall. Inside, Nicole sat with a coffee cup balanced on crossed legs. Across from her, Bradley and a man in a white coat. The doctors agreed, right? Bradley said, his voice low and calculating. Every document has to be flawless. One mistake, and we lose everything. Nicole's voice came back sweet as sugar and just as false. Don't worry. The 39.5 is already in his account. The chief physician's going to sign off confirming Dad has early Alzheimer's. He's been a little forgetful. It won't take much to trip him up in the interview. Bradley smiled like a man watching a deal close. Once the court declares him incompetent, the $22 million comes to you. Then we send him somewhere upstate, fully isolated, no way to reach anybody. Nicole laughed, quiet and tired. He should have just stayed home. Instead, he wants to go scatter Mom's ashes somewhere. I'm exhausted pretending to be the devoted daughter. Standing in that hallway, every word hit me like a current running straight through my chest. My own daughter's cruelty went further than anything I'd let myself imagine. This wasn't about money anymore. She wanted to erase my legal existence and lock me away until I died so she could take what was left. I didn't storm the room. My face stayed calm. I pulled out my phone, switched on the recorder, and let every word, the bribe, the plan, all of it save itself in full. They thought I was a frail old man on the edge of collapse. They had no idea what they'd just started. I turned and walked back out, my footsteps even, and steady on the tile. I called a number I hadn't dialed in years. Grady, I said, I need you to prepare for the biggest demolition job of my life. Grady Doyle's office sat on the top floor of a dark glass tower downtown. He was already waiting with a cup of black coffee when I walked in at 8 that morning. A lawyer people around town called a shark for good reason. I played him the recording. He listened without interrupting once, then leaned back with a dangerous kind of satisfaction. That's a perfect plan for going to prison. I could have both of them in cuffs by tomorrow if you want that. I shook my head. My eyes were bloodshot, but my voice came out flat as frozen concrete. Prison's too easy right now. I don't want them locked up before they've had a chance to enjoy what they think they've already won. I want to take apart the life I built for them while they're standing at the top of it. I want them to lose everything in a single day, same as they planned to take my life away from me. Grady smiled like he'd been waiting years for a client with this kind of nerve. That's exactly the style I'd expect from a man who built half this city with his own hands. Where do you want to start? The load-bearing pillars, I told him. The house. The joint account. The whole reputation the Kesslers are so proud of. I built every brick of it. I'll be the one to take it back down." He slid a folder across the desk, the original charter from my old company. Still airtight, still legally binding. Any gift made to my daughter came with a clause. Proven harm or conspiracy against the person who gave it meant an automatic right of reclamation within 24 hours. He also had a contact, a real estate investor named Frank Delacroix, who specialized in fast, distressed sales, ready to wire cash the same day. I signed everything without hesitation. Every signature felt like another nail driven into the coffin of the life Nicole and Bradley thought was permanently theirs. "It's 9 now," Grady said, checking his watch. "Ship sails at 11. I've got 2 hours to get you ready to watch this come down." I went to the harbor. I wanted to see their faces one more time before I gave the order. The sun over the water was blinding, the 6-star ship rising out of the harbor like something out of a magazine neither of us grew up reading. I stood behind a concrete pillar, watching the VIP deck. There was Nicole, in white silk, laughing beside Bradley and his parents, champagne foaming into glasses raised in celebration, celebrating a trip paid for with my sweat, built on my late wife's final wish, twisted into a gift for people who'd never lifted a brick in their lives. I looked at the daughter I used to love more than anything on this earth, and I felt the last piece of pity in me finally let go. The horn sounded. The ship pulled away from the dock. I took out my phone and sent one word to Grady: "Detonate." While that ship carried them out into open water, I sat in Frank Delacroix's temporary office downtown and spent the next 5 hours dismantling, piece by piece, everything I'd ever given them. First, the house, the reclamation clause meant it came back to me almost instantly, the recording from the clinic more than enough evidence. Second, the joint account $450,000, gone to zero with a single transfer, the exact money Nicole had planned to use, while stripping my rights out from under me. Third, the house itself, sold to Delacroix below market value, with one condition: his crew would clear every belonging from the property, while Nicole and Bradley were still at sea, and leave nothing behind. I want to be honest. I didn't feel joy doing any of this. I felt something closer to relief, the kind you feel when a structure you knew was unsafe finally comes down before it hurts someone. Out on the water, Nicole strolled into a boutique on the ship's upper deck and reached for a $9,000 handbag, sliding her black VIP card across the counter with the easy confidence of someone who'd never once had a card declined in her life. She had no idea what was about to happen. The machine let out a long, flat error tone. The associate apologized. Nicole snapped that it must be a mistake, that there were hundreds of thousands sitting in that account, that the machine had to be wrong. She swiped again. Same tone. Her face went from flushed to pale as she pulled up the banking app right there at the counter. The ship's slow Wi-Fi finally loading a number she wasn't ready for. Zero. A red notice sat beneath it. Assets. Frozen ownership dispute. Suspected fraud. Vivian Kessler's voice cut through the boutique, cold and sharp. "What's going on, Nicole? Why can't you pay for a handbag?" Nicole stammered something about a bank error. Bradley came rushing over minutes later, his own cards locked, his parents' cards locked, the sweet payment failing to process. A security officer approached shortly after, polite but firm, informing the Kesslers that due to payment issues, they'd need to vacate the VIP section for standard accommodations. If you've ever watched someone's whole carefully built image collapse in real time, in public, in front of the exact people they were trying to impress, you know there's a particular kind of silence that follows. Nobody laughs. Nobody says anything. They just watch. Vivian looked at the cafeteria tray in front of her daughter-in-law with something close to disgust. "You told us your family had money. You told us your father was a senile old man who was easy to handle. So why are we the ones eating off plastic trays?" Nicole had no answer. Bradley wouldn't even look at her. For 3 days, the ship carried them further from land, and further from any explanation. Nicole called my number over and over. It rang and rang into nothing. When the ship finally docked, they stepped off looking hollowed out, their image in ruins after 3 days of quiet contempt from the very in-laws they'd sacrificed me to impress. Nicole rushed straight to the house, desperate to salvage whatever dignity she had left. She stood at the gate and froze. The smart locks were gone, replaced with heavy mechanical ones. Two men in moving company uniforms stood where the usual security guard should have been. She screamed for them to let her in. Frank Delacroix stepped out, holding the signed agreement. "I'd suggest staying calm, Miss Kessler. This house is legally mine now. Your father sold it 3 days ago." "That's impossible," she shrieked. "He has Alzheimer's. He had no right to sell anything." Frank simply pointed across the street. Her whole world of luxury sat in a heap on the sidewalk: designer dresses, handbags, shoes, all of it dumped under a piece of cardboard reading, "Free, take whatever you want." Strangers were already picking through it. A woman held up the dress Nicole wore at her own wedding reception. A child stepped on a watchbox without a second thought. Nicole threw herself into the crowd, screaming for people to let go of things that weren't theirs anymore. Bradley arrived, saw the pile, saw the paperwork, and understood everything at once. He didn't move to help her. Moments later, his parents pulled up. Vivian rolled down the window, looked at the chaos, looked at her son's wife sobbing in the middle of the street, and said only, "What a family of cheap con artists. Julian, get your things. We're filing for divorce immediately. This family doesn't belong anywhere near ours." Their car pulled away, Bradley chasing after it, choosing his last lifeline over the woman he'd married. Nicole collapsed onto the sidewalk, alone, surrounded by strangers picking through what used to be her life. Her phone rang, my name on the screen. She answered with dirt-streaked hands. "Dad, please." Bradley left me. His family won't even look at me. "I've lost everything. I know I was wrong. Please, just let me come home." I was standing at the airport by then, my late wife's ashes in the bag beside me, watching a plane through the window that would finally carry her somewhere she always wanted to go. My voice didn't carry any anger when I answered. Just the same calm I'd built my whole career on. "I don't have Alzheimer's, Nicole. I finally woke up, that's all." She went silent. "I built you a good life," I told her. "You chose to tear down its foundation instead of standing on it. You and Bradley paid a doctor $39,500 to call me insane. I already sent the recording and every transaction to the people who needed to see it. They'll be looking for you and that doctor very soon. You can explain yourself in court. Dad, please. I'm your only daughter. You stopped being my daughter the moment you erased me from your mother's last wish," I said. "Live the rest of your life in what you built." I ended the call. I dropped the SIM card from my old phone into a trash bin by the gate and walked toward my flight, feeling lighter than I had in years, like I'd just finished the last honest job of my career. Here's what this whole thing taught me, and it's something I think about more than almost anything else in my life now. The mistake most parents make isn't loving their children too much. It's never once checking whether that love has quietly turned into an assumption on the other end, an entitlement instead of a gift. If there's one thing you do today because of this story, let it be this. Look at what you've given the people you love, and ask honestly whether it's still being treated like a gift, or if somewhere along the way it started being treated like something owed. And here's a question worth sitting with tonight: if the people closest to you thought you'd never find out the truth, what would they be doing differently right now? Kindness toward the people we raise is never the mistake. Letting that kindness get mistaken for weakness, that's the mistake. Once the foundation under a family starts to rot, no amount of money or appearance can keep the whole thing from eventually coming down. I'd really like to know what you think of how I handled all this. Drop a 1 in the comments if you think I did exactly the right thing. Drop a 2 if you think I should have gone straight to the police the moment I heard that recording, or drop a 3 if you think even this was more mercy than they deserved. Tell me where you're watching this from tonight and what time it is where you are right now. And if anything like this, a child's entitlement, a betrayal you never saw coming from your own family, has ever happened to you, I want to hear about it in the comments. If this story stayed with you the way it stayed with me, hit subscribe, because there's another one coming soon, and I don't want you to miss it. Thank you for listening all the way through. I'll see you in the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences. Fully rewritten and reimagined in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.